Climate change was a major factor in deciding the last election in 2007. This time, even though it's since helped bring down 2 opposition leaders and a Prime Minister, it's harder to assess what impact it will have on polling day. The big difference this time is that the government has put its carbon trading scheme, rejected 3 times by the Senate, on hold at least until 2012. And Tony Abbott's opposition has ruled out any scheme at all, at least until 2015. That's left industry warning that investment in crucial power infrastructure is in a state of limbo, and environmentalists claiming that the country is going backwards at the very time when urgent action is needed. Shortly we'll hear from the government and the opposition in the first of our election debates for this campaign, but first this assessment of the main policy arguments from Matt Peacock.
Each year, Australia burns more than 1 million tonnes of fossil fuel, from the coal-fired power plants which light up the city skylines to the oil that drives much of the nation's transport. That means that in Australia there are more carbon emissions per head than in just about any other country of the world. In this election, both major parties promise a 5% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions within a decade. But environmentalists and industry alike want to know how.
I don't think the policy environment for generation investment's ever been less certain.
Now we're in a situation where we have virtually no effective policies from either major party.
Less than a year ago, both major parties promised an emissions trading scheme to fight what Kevin Rudd called the greatest moral challenge of our generation. A challenge, echoed his then Deputy Julia Gillard, that was urgent.
Climate change is real and it requires us to act, and the longer we delay in taking action, the higher the costs of that action will be.
Tony Abbott, though, appeared unconvinced. As a shadow minister, he described the argument on climate change as absolute crap.
Do you still believe that?
Look, it was a bit of hyperbole. It's not my considered position.
Mr Abbott's opposition to emissions trading as a great big new tax won him the Liberal leadership. And Labor too has now abandoned plans for the trade, most likely for at least another term.
You now have both the Coalition and the Government having completely dumped a carbon price, when any economist will tell you that the cheapest way to reduce emissions is to put in a carbon price.
Labor is now promising emissions standards for new coal-fired power stations, $1 billion for transmission lines to renewable energy sources, tax breaks for green buildings, new vehicle emission standards and cash for older cars, and a citizens' assembly of 150 Australians to get national consensus on emissions trade.
A representative group of Australians drawn from all age groups, parts of the country and walks of life will help move us forward.
We've already had several reviews over many years into the benefits and issues to do with developing an emissions trading scheme or a price on carbon, and I think people find it hard to believe that we could be having another one. Next we shut Hazelwood.
Greg Houston advises potential international investors for Australia's energy sector, a job he's finding increasingly difficult.
A year ago there were pretty clear assumptions that could be made about the future price or the likely future price on carbon in light of the ETS proposals as they stood at the time. Now that's an almost impossible task.
The Coalition is promising a direct action plan with a $2.5 billion emissions reduction fund to purchase cleaner outcomes, including major sequestration of carbon in soil as well as 20 million extra trees, 1 million solar energy homes and a 15,000-strong Green Army in 5 years.
The kinds of things that we might purchase will perhaps be increased soil carbon, which will improve soil productivity.
The Coalition's policies are very expensive and unfortunately won't get us to the 5% reduction.
We've all seen those photos of Hazelwood.
This week, Victorian Premier John Brumby targeted Hazelwood, Australia's dirtiest coal-fired power station, for early closure. It uses the brown coal that provides 90% of Victoria's power. But earlier this year, a Santos proposal for an alternative gas-fired generator with a quarter of the emissions was abandoned.
That proposal, to be economic, requires some kind of price on carbon, and soon after the emissions trading scheme was stopped or put on hold, that proposal was also put on hold.
Without an emissions trade, both major parties now say they could help finance Hazelwood's phase-out directly from taxpayers' dollars. For the electricity suppliers, though, that's an ad hoc fix without the industry-wide certainty they need.
Investment intentions have fallen from $18 billion 12 months ago to just $8 billion now. So that's a drop of $10 billion in the space of 1 year.
If that slump continues, huge price hikes are likely, according to the energy suppliers CEO Brad Page.
We think you've got at most the next 2 years to solve this policy malaise. We've got to get certainty by then.
The investment reduction is not only new plant, but it's in maintaining and extending the life of existing plant. So it isn't business as usual.
And whoever wins government, it's the Australian Greens likely to hold the Senate balance of power, warns Senator Christine Milne.
We want to see deep cuts. We want to see a carbon price as quickly as possible because we want transformation of the whole economy and society.